What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to talk about the new article that came out in The Hill, and it said, sadly, Trump is right about Ukraine. And when you get newspaper articles like The Hill saying that Trump is right about Ukraine, especially when the writer of the article agrees that he rarely agrees with anything Trump does, that's a problem. Mainstream media, as well as any type of mainstream media that we watch at home or on the internet, should be very worried when people like this fella here that wrote this article starts agreeing with exactly what Trump's doing and what he has said. There's 3 key points to this. On 3 key points that illuminate why Ukrainians and former President Joe Biden, not merely Russian President Vladimir Putin, bear significant responsibility for the outbreak and perpetuation of the war in Ukraine. First, as recently documented by overwhelming forensic evidence and affirmed even by Kiev court, it was Ukrainian right-wing militants who started the violence in 2014 that provoked Russia's initial invasion of the country's southeast, including Crimea. They have a big right-wing neo-Nazi type party in Ukraine that are extremely rough. They will take violence to police, to government, they don't care. And they're being partially funded by the government and the military there. There's a whole documentary on it, and people don't actually understand how bad it is. Ukraine has a very large neo-Nazi group of basically white males that are militant, and they are just ready for whatever type of war they can get involved in. It almost seems like it's a turn-on to them. There's a documentary, which I'll try to find it and link it down below so you guys can watch it. So, even by Kiev court, it was Ukrainian right-wing militants who started the violence in 2014 that provoked Russia's initial invasion of the country's southeast, including Crimea. Back then, Ukraine had a pro-Russia president, Viktor Yanukovych, who had won free and fair elections in 2010 with strong support from ethnic Russians in the country's southeast. So yeah, you heard that right. Back then, Ukraine had a pro-Russia president, Viktor Yanukovych. In 2013, he decided to pursue economic cooperation with Russia rather than Europe as previously planned. Pro-Western activists responded with mainly peaceful occupation of the capital's Maiden Square and government offices until the president eventually offered substantial concessions in mid-February 2014, after which they mainly withdrew. Just then, however, right-wing militants overlooking the square started shooting Ukrainian police and remaining protesters. Police returned fire at the militants, who then claimed bogusly that the police had killed the unarmed protesters. Outraged by this ostensible government massacre, Ukrainians descended on the capital and ousted the president, who fled to Russia for protection. Putin responded by deploying troops to Crimea and weapons to the southeast Donbas region on behalf of the ethnic Russians who felt their president had been undemocratically overthrown. While this backstory does not justify Russia's invasion, it explains what it was, hardly unprovoked. Second, Ukraine's president Volodymyr Zelensky contributed to a wider war by violating peace deals with Russia and seeking NATO military aid and membership. The deals, known as Minsk I and Minsk II, had been negotiated under his predecessor, President Petro Poroshenko, in 2014 and 2015 to end the fighting in the southeast and protect Ukraine. Was to guarantee Donbas limited political autonomy by the end of 2015, which Putin believed would be sufficient to prevent Ukraine from joining or serving as a military base for NATO. Regrettably, Ukraine refused for 7 years to fulfill that commitment. Zelensky even campaigned in 2019 on a promise to finally implement the accords to prevent further war. But after winning the election, he reneged, apparently less concerned about risking war than looking weak on Russia. Zelensky instead increased weapon imports from NATO countries, which was the last straw for Putin. So on February 1st, 2022, Russia recognized the independence of Donbas, deployed troops there for peacekeeping, and demanded Zelensky renounce his quest for NATO military assistance and membership. When Zelensky again refused, Putin massively expanded his military offensive on February 24th. Intentionally or not, Zelensky had provoked Russian aggression. Although that obviously does not excuse Moscow's subsequent war crimes. Third, Joe Biden too contributed crucially to the escalation and perpetuation of fighting in late 2021. When Putin mobilized forces on Ukraine's border and demanded implementation of the Minsk deals, it seemed obvious that unless Zelensky relented, Russia would invade to at least form a land bridge between Donbass and Crimea. Considering that Ukraine already was existentially dependent on U.S. military assistance, if President Biden had insisted that Zelensky comply with Putin's request, it would have happened. Instead, Biden lamentably left the decision to Zelensky and pledged that if Russia invaded, the U.S. would respond swiftly and decisively, which Zelensky read as a green light to defy Putin. Had Trump been president, he likely would not have provided such a blank check, so Zelensky would have had little choice but to implement the Minsk deals to avert war. Even if Zelensky had still refused and provoked Russia to invade, Trump would have denied him a veto over peace negotiations, which Biden recklessly gave by declaring there's nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That pledge tragically emboldened Ukraine to prolong the war in expectation of eventually decisive U.S. military aid, which Biden then refused to supply due to fear of nuclear escalation. In that way, Biden raised a false hope in Ukraine, needlessly perpetuating a war that has killed or wounded hundreds of thousands in the last 2 years alone, during which the front lines have shifted by less than 1% of Ukraine's territory. So, there's a little history for you, a little timeline on what's been going on, and how those of you anti-Putin, anti-Russia people out there maybe haven't had any of this information. Maybe you didn't know about all this. But if you don't know, now you know. I personally am not for either one of them. I don't trust either one of them. But also at the same time, Ukraine is not innocent here. Ukraine, they have some real scumbag tendencies. So a lot of these people that want to stick up for Ukraine, that are all pro-Ukraine, this and that, I feel bad for them, because they've been duped. And they honestly believe that they're fighting for the right cause, the right people. And they're not. Ukraine asked for this. And I've been saying this from the get-go. They literally asked for this. And they've got what they asked for. They fucked around and they found out. So, I'll link the article down below. There's more to read on it. That was the gist of it. Great article. Good information. Great timeline. I'm going to get back to cleaning this garage. Y'all be blessed. Have a great day. Take care.